join us on Patreon, and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
There are stories buried beneath the sands of time, whispered only in the rustling of ancient trees and the echoes of forgotten tongues. History, as we know it, has been written and rewritten by those who held the pen, often leaving out the voices of those who lived in defiance of oppression, those who thrived against the tide of erasure. Among these lost narratives is the story of the Yamasee Tribe, a people whose history has been obscured and distorted, leaving behind only fragments of their existence. But what if we dig deeper, past the European chronicles that sought to reduce them to mere footnotes? What if we piece together the legacy of the Yamasee not just as warriors and traders, but as a people whose identity challenges the conventional narratives of both Native American and African history? For centuries, the Yamasee have been described in passing, mentioned in colonial records, referenced in wars and alliances, and sometimes even dismissed as a vanished people. Yet, their legacy is far richer and more complex than mainstream history acknowledges. Among the many overlooked truths is the physical appearance of the Yamasee, described in various historical accounts as dark-skinned, with features that bore striking resemblance to those of African descent. This has led to speculation and debate. Were the Yamasee among the indigenous black-skinned people of North America? Did they represent an ancient lineage of dark-skinned natives? Or was their ancestry shaped by early African migrations long before European contact? The answers lie buried within the untold stories of their culture, their resistance, and their eventual fate. The origins of the Yamasee are shrouded in mystery, much like the origins of many indigenous tribes of North America. By the time European explorers and settlers arrived in the southeastern region, the Yamasee were already a well-established people with a vibrant culture, intricate trade networks, and an unwavering spirit. Their presence was deeply embedded in the land stretching from present-day South Carolina to Florida, where they thrived amidst the lush landscapes of rivers, swamps, and coastal plains. Some historians believe that the Yamasee were originally part of the Muscogee-speaking peoples, closely related to the Creek, Choctaw, and other southeastern tribes. Others suggest that they were an amalgamation of different indigenous groups who had formed a new identity over time. But what makes their story particularly intriguing is the consistent description of their physical features. Spanish and English records from the colonial era often noted the presence of dark-skinned indigenous people, and the Yamasee were among those described as having skin as black as the Africans. This description has fueled theories suggesting that the Yamasee might have been part of an ancient lineage of black-skinned Native Americans, predating the arrival of enslaved Africans in the Americas. While mainstream historians have largely dismissed such claims, oral traditions among indigenous and African American communities continue to recount stories of black-skinned natives who lived alongside other tribes, intermarrying and preserving their distinct heritage. By the late 16th and early 17th centuries, the Yamasee found themselves entangled in the complex web of European colonization. The Spanish, the English, and later the French all sought to control the region, using indigenous tribes as pawns in their battles for supremacy. The Yamasee, like many other Native American groups, were forced to navigate these turbulent waters, sometimes forming alliances with European powers, sometimes resisting with all their might. The Spanish were among the first Europeans to establish contact with the Yamasee, incorporating them into their mission system in Florida. Catholic missionaries sought to convert them to Christianity while also using them as laborers. However, the Yamasee were not a people easily subdued. Their resistance to Spanish control eventually pushed them further north, where they encountered the English settlers in South Carolina. In the early 18th century, the Yamasee played a pivotal role in the Yamasee War of 1715, one of the most significant Native American uprisings against English colonial rule. The war erupted due to increasing tensions over land encroachments, broken treaties, and the exploitation of indigenous people through the Indian slave trade. The English had been capturing and enslaving Native Americans, often selling them to plantations in the Caribbean. The Yamasee, along with their allies, rose in fierce resistance, launching coordinated attacks on English settlements. Although they initially had the upper hand, the Yamasee and their allies ultimately faced defeat due to the overwhelming firepower and reinforcements brought by the English. Many Yamasee were killed, while others were forced to flee south to Spanish-controlled Florida, where they found refuge among the Seminoles, another tribe with deep African and indigenous connections. Those who remained in the Carolinas faced enslavement, their identities erased, their history rewritten by those who sought to erase them from existence. The story of the Yamasee does not end with their military defeat. Instead, their legacy continued to shape the cultural landscape of the southeastern United States, particularly among the Seminole and Gullah Geechee communities. The intermingling of the Yamasee with escaped African slaves led to the formation of distinct cultures that blended indigenous traditions with African heritage. One of the most compelling aspects of this legacy is the striking similarity between the customs of the Yamasee and those of African-descended peoples in the region. The Yamasee engaged in agriculture that mirrored the farming techniques of West African societies, cultivating maize, beans, squash, and rice in a manner that closely resembled the rice cultivation traditions brought over by African slaves. Their spiritual practices, too, bore remarkable resemblances to African religious beliefs, incorporating ancestor veneration, drumming rituals, and ceremonial dances that reflected a fusion of indigenous and African traditions. As the centuries passed, the Yamasee identity was absorbed into the broader fabric of African American and Native American history. The Seminole Wars of the 19th century saw the emergence of the Black Seminoles, a group of African-descended people who fought alongside the Seminoles against the U.S. government's attempts to remove them from their lands. Many of these Black Seminoles were believed to be descendants of the Yamasee, carrying forward their warrior spirit and refusal to be subjugated. Despite their profound impact on the history of the southeastern United States, the Yamasee have largely been omitted from mainstream historical narratives. The systematic erasure of their contributions in existence has led to the misconception that they simply disappeared after the Yamasee War. However, their bloodlines, traditions, and stories continue to survive in the communities that inherited their legacy. In recent years, scholars, genealogists, and indigenous historians have begun to reclaim the history of the Yamasee, challenging the conventional narratives that sought to erase them. Oral histories passed down through African American and Native American families have resurfaced, revealing hidden connections and forgotten truths about the black-skinned people who once roamed the lands of the Southeast. The Yamasee were not merely a lost tribe. They were a resilient people whose legacy defied the boundaries imposed upon them. Their existence challenges the simplistic racial categorizations that European colonization sought to impose, reminding us that history is far more complex than the stories we have been told. The Yamasee stand as a testament to the resilience of a people who refuse to be erased. Their history, though buried beneath centuries of colonial narratives, remains an undeniable part of the fabric of America's past. They were warriors, traders, farmers, and spiritual leaders, people whose dark skin was not an anomaly, but a symbol of their ancient origins. In reclaiming their story, we not only honor their legacy, but also challenge the limitations of history itself. For as long as their descendants remember, the Yamasee will never truly be lost.